Voice recording enabled.
Should be included in this bill that has to pass by the end of this month to avert a government shutdown. Okay.
And meanwhile, Aaron, you traveled to Izium. What did you see and what did you hear there?
That's right, Jose. We spent the last few days in the recently liberated town of Izium, Ukraine, and saw firsthand the brutality of Russian occupation. The strategy behind, palpable. For 6 excruciating months, Ukrainian investigators say Russian forces used the town's police station as a prison and torture center, keeping some 40 Ukrainians at a time.
In this room, there are 4 people.
They have 4 people in this cell.
In this small room.
Chief investigator Serhiy Bolvanov shows us the horrifying conditions he says prisoners were forced to endure. Some desperately marking the walls to pass the time.
9 days, somebody was there on this wall. You can see date, 29 June 22. This is named Lyoha. It's like Alexei. This marks God save us. And cross.
Ukrainian investigators say the prisoners were brought upstairs to be tortured, including civilians. He believes to terrorize the local population. What goes through your mind as a human?
I'm a human at first, and when I see this place, it shocked me. I'm very scared.
Bolvanov says there's a link between the prison and the mass grave on the outskirts of town, where, according to Ukrainian investigators, they're exhuming bodies showing signs of torture. The Kremlin is calling the allegations a lie. Residents tell us most died from the relentless bombardment. Johan Kryev says for months his neighborhood was bombed. Missiles rained down from the sky night and day. What is this? It's shrapnel, he says. They were flying everywhere. Explosions were hitting everything. These are the scariest weapons. His wife, Antonina, shows us where shrapnel struck her arm and abdomen. The bombing was so powerful, their home was lifted off its frame. They had nowhere to run. All they could do was hide. Imagine living in this basement for months. You have no phone, no internet, no electricity. In fact, this is your only light source. You're running out of water and food. At night, the explosions are so loud, you can't sleep. You don't know if your home will be the one hit next. For half a year, that was the reality of the people who live here. But now, with Russians pushing back, people have left their homes, enjoying this moment of peace for however long it lasts. While there is some relief there, the people of Izium tell me they're desperate and scared. They're still cut off from the rest of the world. There's still no internet, no cell phone service. They also don't have electricity or gas. One resident telling me she's very concerned about the coming winter. But what she said they need most right now is medicine. They haven't had medical care for the last 6 months. Jose?
Aaron McLaughlin, thank you so much. Sahil Kapoor, thank you as well for being with us. Fresh off his trip to London for the Queen's funeral, President Biden is now heading to New York later today for the United Nations General Assembly. In his speech before the body tomorrow, the president is expected to push for more support for Ukraine's war effort. Could learn more about what he will say in a briefing at the White House next hour. NBC correspondent Carol Lee joins us from New York. Carol, good morning. Do we have any more information of what the president plans to address at the UN tomorrow?
Well, Jose, the main thing that the president plans to address, according to White House officials, is really to emphasize the importance of respecting international borders. So that obviously really relates to Ukraine, which is an issue that's going to dominate this gathering of the UN General Assembly, which is the first time in several years that it's in person, fully in person, as opposed to some virtual meetings and addresses that we've seen in recent years because of COVID. So we're going to hear from the president on Ukraine, and part of that is to rally the world around continuing to show support people and to not turn their attention elsewhere as the war continues to drag on. And you'll also hear the president build on some of what he said in his first address to the UN General Assembly last year, where he talked about rebuilding U.S. alliances with NATO and the importance of the U.S. standing up for countries that are friends and allies who might be dominated by other countries who have bad intentions. So, and as far as other issues on the president's agenda, he'll have bilateral meetings, including with the new British Prime Minister. And there are some notable absences here at the UN General Assembly. The leaders of China, President Xi, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, neither of them will be in attendance. However, there will be a virtual address from Ukrainian President Zelensky. That is tomorrow afternoon. And as for other issues that the president's expected to focus on while he's here, it'll be things like food security and global health issues and climate change, things like that, Jose.
And speaking of health issues, the president facing some pushback from the medical community after saying in that 60 Minutes interview that the pandemic was over. Any reaction from the White House?
Well, what White House officials are saying is that the president was talking in terms of how most Americans are viewing the pandemic at this particular phase. That a lot of Americans aren't wearing masks anymore, feel like the pandemic has moved on, that while we're still living with COVID, it's not what it was. And so that's what they're saying. At the same time, they're also saying there still is a national health emergency in effect, and they're still encouraging people to get vaccinated and still want some funding from Congress, but their argument is that the president was speaking generally about how most people feel about the pandemic at this particular time. Jose?
Carol Lee in New York, thank you so much. Next, this case was the subject of a true crime podcast that gripped the entire nation. Why a judge just vacated Adnan Syed's murder conviction after 23 years.
Something you probably do know. Progressive can not only offer you a great price when you bundle home and auto, they offer you round-the-clock protection. Something you probably don't know? The drive of a basketball hoop, including the base, weighs around 400 pounds. Something you probably do know? There's a windstorm coming. Something you probably don't know? A basketball hoop tipping over can poke a hole in a car roof like a can opener. Bundle your home and auto with Progressive and get more than a great price. Get round-the-clock protection. Something you know? They're the things you don't know. Coverage for Progressive Casualty Insurance Company affiliates and third-party insurers and subject to policy terms. Bundle discount not available in all states or situations.
Loving dogs is easy. Navigating their care can be hard. Introducing The Farmer's Dog, a service that delivers fresh, healthy meals with all the balanced nutrition your dog needs. Just answer a few quick questions about your dog's age, breed, ideal weight, and more, and The Farmer's Dog tailors a plan just